Hi, Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns. From this batch of green cherry that I've received recently, I think I'll make a natural edge bowl. This one seems to be a perfect candidate. It's got some good tight bark on this side. A little bit of checking here on the inside, but I think that'll disappear in the bottom. I'll probably not use the entire depth. It'll be more of a shallow natural edge. But let's see if we can get a good natural edge bowl out of this nice piece of cherry.
Since this will be a natural edge bowl, I'm driving a two-prong drive center into the approximate center of the bark side of the cherry log with a wooden mallet. The prongs are aligned with the grain. A hammer would tend to mushroom out the end of the center. I could nip off the corners of the block on a bandsaw, but it's almost easier just to trim the corners on the lathe. Now with the lathe turning just below the vibration point of the lathe, this is very slow at this point because of how irregular the log is. As I do remove wood, I'm turning up the lathe speed until I get to a speed that smooths out the gouge cuts. Actually, this is going easier than I had anticipated. After I get the corners off and somewhat cylindrical, I've turned up the speed. Now my focus is to cut a mounting tenon on the bottom, plus another ridge above the tenon to help my eye see the curve through the foot. I'm a bit late balancing this bowl, but it's not too far off. With the lathe off, I'm holding a finger on the tool rest where the bark edge hits and comparing this to the other side for both the upper bark along the end grain and the lower bark along the side grain. Next, I'm adjusting the tailstock by about 1/4 inch in this case. Now I need to true up the bowl again. I'm also doing a little scraping to clean up the exterior, but instead of sawdust or shavings, I'm getting a sawdust mush with the bowl as wet as it is. Now to reverse the bowl into a chuck. I'll start with the tailstock in place, but not for long, as I need that space to maneuver my gouge. I'm using my large bowl gouge. I'm alternating between cutting at the wall and hogging out the wood in the middle. The outer layer of bark is very stringy and is tending to pull itself off before I can get to it with a gouge. I stopped several times to use a chisel to trim back the bark. This did not work very well. I lost a lot of the outer bark layer. I finished up the bottom with a heavy bowl scraper. You may notice a problem with the upper camera. I'm hollowing out the interior, so why is my camera lens getting sprayed? Here's a theory. The tubes in the wood are full of water, but the tube walls keep it contained. Since the tube extends to both sides of the bowl, the force of the centrifugal force keeps it balanced and only a little is released. Now that I'm cutting apart the tubes while hollowing, I'm also cutting the column of water in the tube, thus allowing the water in both end-grained walls to escape. Enough makes it to the camera to be a real problem. What do you think?
Just a note about my sander. I've often used my electric drill for sanding, but I actually prefer this air-powered angle sanding unit. This is a Grex unit, but the main things to look for are it is a angle driven and that it is smaller and lighter than an electric drill. Advantage of that is you can get into the sides and sand the sides of the bowl without it hitting the opposite side because of the bulk and it is also lighter and a lot easier to control than a big drill. So I like this. The only downside to this is that it really takes a lot of airflow to drive it. Small compressor won't work. It It's got to be one that can really deliver the airflow necessary to drive this sander unit. But for me, it's worth it.
Now to address the foot. I've measured the bowl's wall and compared it to the wood at the foot. I have plenty of wood to remove. I've mounted a rounded block of wood to the headstock, then put a piece of sanding pad between the bowl and the wood. The tailstock provides the clamping pressure. Then form the foot and finish sand the bottom, except for a small spigot that I have to leave for tailstock pressure. When finished, I broke off the spigot and sanded the middle of the foot at a drill press, then signed the bowl with a wood burner before applying walnut oil to the bowl.
As they say, if you fall off a bike, get right back and start riding again. If you blow up a natural edge bowl, get right back up to the lathe and turn another one. So here's the successor to that natural edge bowl, just a trifle smaller, but a very nice bowl. A couple of differences with this bowl as opposed to the earlier one. I waited 2 days at least between having it turned and when I actually went to sand it. And I think that gave me much more ability to sand it without the sandpaper loading up. If you recall with this one I made just a few weeks ago, I sanded it right when I finished turning it with my tools. And the problem then was that it loaded up the sandpaper with the fresh wet wood and it was a real pain to sand. So this one now, just to finish that story now, it has warp, it has some significant distortion side to side, but it is still a pretty and well worth turning green to see what happens and to have that sort of bowl. So that's that one. It does have a little bit of a crack at that knot that was in the center, but I think that is just adding interest at this point. Go back to this one. This will still warp because it has a lot more drying to go, but it is smooth and finished at this point. I did lose a little bit of the outer edge of the cherry bark. I think that edge was a lot stringier and it's a real tough one to try and keep. But that said, this is a keeper for me. I like it, and I'll continue to turn natural edge bowls even out of cherry.
We'll see you again next week for another wood turning video. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and tell your friends. Always wear your full face shield. Goggles are not enough protection. Until next week, this is Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns. Let's keep on turning.